big misconception that I encounter a lot with people when I tell them I work for the DOT is like, there'll be people who are like, oh my gosh, these city roads are terrible. Why haven't we fixed this pothole that popped up last week? Oh no, ODOT. And I'm like, okay, I know it's a need, but we have this long planning process and we have to figure out how to fit it in. And it takes more than just like, oh, this is a problem, let's go fix it right now. Because if it was like that, then pretty much nothing would be done because it'd be all by the seat of our pants. It takes a lot of behind the scenes work to get a thought of, hey, this project needs to be done, to advertising to designers for them to get the contract to design it, and then the design process, and then going to advertisement for contractors, and then the contractors get it and then build it. So there's just a lot going on.
Welcome to the Level Design Podcast, a podcast for architects and engineers who want to thrive in this industry by creating more freedom, fulfillment, and financial security. Join us in uncovering how to restore value and honor to the unique people who choose to be designers and caretakers of our built world, and why it's essential to the future of our society, our industry, and our planet.
So, Scott, why don't you start by telling me why you kept bringing up Whitney's name to me? And we finally got her on the podcast. Why were you interested in having her on?
Oh, that's a good question. Why would I do that? I think taxpayers and infrastructure, especially on a large scale, as we get larger, as our local entities, local governments, local districts that are doing our local infrastructure services, they're much more connected to their communities. And as we get further away, we get into counties and states, they seem further away. Decisions seem further away. And almost like this thing that you can't be involved in or don't understand, and you just, I think a lot of us default to, it's this horrible, wasteful thing going on that we can't do anything about. And I'm driving down the highway and the interstate and you're going, why the heck is this happening? Who are these crazy people? And why are they making these decisions? So Whitney's in this world, and I actually think there's a lot of brilliance going on, even at these state and federal levels. So I just, and Whitney's in some of that, just a component of it. So there's all these wonderful people that are doing these wonderful tasks and things on behalf of us as citizens. And so what a great way to just bring one of those people in, and she can talk about her life on one of these aspects of our transportation systems and what this wonderful human is doing and how passionate they are about it in a big system on behalf of the taxpayer.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a unique angle and perspective that a lot of people aren't even aware that that's a thing, that we need to be efficient with how we spend taxpayer dollars within infrastructure. And before I say too much more, as someone who doesn't know much about this area, why don't you, Whitney, tell us a little bit about it and brief kind of context of your journey?
Okay. So I started out in the field. For 5 years, I was involved in, at the time, the biggest project ODOT had ever led. We built a massive truss bridge over an interstate, and it was to carry a railroad. And so I did that project, and then I started on the next phase of it, and then this current opportunity opened up where I could run the estimates for cost and time, and then I could also run the value engineering program for the state.
Wait. Whitney, what's value engineering?
So value engineering is basically going back and taking a second look at a project or a product. It can be in all fields, but it's taking a second look at something with fresh eyes that weren't involved in the design of it and seeing what we can do to make the product better or what we can do to minimize the cost of the project or the time that's needed to build it. But we're doing that in a way that we're not trying to cut corners. So we're looking for ways that we can take new innovative technologies or construction methods or just changing up. Like sometimes we've just changed up the phasing or changed up like how things are being built. We're not really introducing anything new to the project. We're just rearranging the pieces to save time for that drivers are stuck in traffic on a construction zone, and also to improve worker safety because they're not there as long. So,
Well, I was just curious how much of it is because a part of cost savings, which might be counterintuitive, is looking into the future, the sustainability of a project.
mm-hmm.
How much of your value estimation includes kind of like longevity?
So if there is something where we are substituting one product for another, we will do a life cycle cost and see how long that product is supposed to just stay in place, like how long it's meant to live, and then compare the cost of replacing it in 15 years as opposed to the cost of replacing a different product in 30 years. So we do look at that because one example I always use in my studies is we're not trying to just be like, okay, we have 9 inches of asphalt, but it'll be cheaper if we just put 7. Well, yes, it would, but that pavement is going to need maintenance more and sooner than 9 inches. So is it something that we're really robbing Peter to pay Paul type of scenario? Or is this something where we could actually do some benefits for?
What we're talking about in context, the Oklahoma, the DOT's, the Whitney's roles is representing the taxpayers as owners. So almost Whitney's role is owner's rep. And she's putting together project needs for servicing transportation, travel, goods, transfer of goods across states, transfer of people and goods across the state from one state to another, people within the state, commerce, economy, and she's the owner's rep for these systems. We talk about this a lot, Miles, where you're like, what if it took 20 days to get goods from one place to the other? It would cost a lot more, and it probably would suffer that trip, right? So these systems are critical to our economy, and Whitney's a owner's rep going to the private sector, reaching out to the private sector for competitive bidding. So when the role here is an owner representative, they've got long range planning documents and needs that they know they have for us as users, and they're saying, hey, let's put this project as a priority. We know we need it for the health of the economy and our citizens and our neighboring states. Let's put this project together, let's design it, and let's offer it up, bid it competitively with the private contracting community to construct it for us. This is often misunderstood, that government is just government. No, government creates most of the private sector work. Okay, they're partners. So our governmental entities are partners with our private sector job creation, getting these projects done together. So I just wanted to get that out.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, our local Association of General Contractors put out a really good commercial, and it went from like ODOT letting a contractor know that they've been awarded the project, and then the contractor calling steel manufacturer and equipment rentals and getting their foremans and all that situated, and just like all the like how it can really just like finger out to so many different businesses that you wouldn't even think of from just one call from ODOT being like, hey, you've got this project.
Yep. That foreman needs a haircut, right?
Yeah. Like, okay, you're gonna be on the side of the highway. You gotta get looking good.
Yeah. Well, keep going on your day-to-day job role. Yeah.
Okay, so I am the value engineering and estimates coordinator. So my daily work really is a lot of it is looking at our contract time for projects. I do that about 2 months ahead of when they're advertised for bids, just to make sure that we have enough time in the contract. Because if we don't have enough time and the contractor asks for more time and we're like, no, we don't want to give you more time, then that will up the financial cost of a project because the contractor knows that they're going to go into liquidated damages. So they have to kind of cover that. And so I do that. That's most of my day-to-day. About 1 week a month, I do the cost estimates for every project that ODOT advertises. just to make sure that the prices that we have in the engineer's estimate align with historical bid prices for that area of the state, and then also for the quantity that we have. So if you think of like Sam's Club, right? You can go buy something in bulk and it'll cost less per unit than if you just go and buy like one thing. We have that too with like reinforcing steel and concrete. So we look for similar quantities to make sure that our prices are kind of aligned with what the historical bid prices show. And then I also run the value engineering program. And so I look for every year we put out an 8-year work plan that says what projects we will be doing for the next 8 years, like where our funding's going for the next 8 years. It's a very transparent way of doing things for a state agency. And I go through and see what projects require one, and then I get the ball rolling on those.
Those 8-year plans are approved by our representatives at the state level. So those are plans and funding that the in this case the state DOT team goes to the representatives and go, we think these are the needs, and those representatives balance that with the entire state budget. And they allocate funds or say, we're not going to give you all the money you're asking for, which is more common. There's other needs in the state that we feel are more important. So it's a very transparent and also voted on budget process that goes on usually maybe annually. So
balance it annually.
That's not staff doing that. That's staff making recommendations to representatives at the state level, which are ultimately saying yes, no, maybe kind of thing.
Yeah, and we actually have, so the representatives decide our budget, of course, and then the Transportation Commission, which is, I want to say half appointed by the governor and half appointed by the legislative branch for our state. They approve the work plan. So we kind of get the funding number from the legislative branch, and then we make a plan, and then the commission has to approve it. It's all involved.
Super interesting that I think a lot of us, and Miles, I'm going to ask you, did you know this was going on? All this planning, selling of the state staff, talking to the legislators about the importance versus other importances in the state. Did you know this was going on almost daily?
No, I mean, it feels like it's, the glue in between all the big pieces that holds it all together that you don't ever see, really.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I had no clue. This is all fascinating to me. And it's reassuring, because if we didn't have that and you, then we would be probably in a way worse spot, spending way more money and then having to do more repairs. So
yeah, and that's
important work.
That's one big misconception that I encounter a lot with people when I tell them I work for the DOT is like, oh, why haven't we fixed this pothole that popped up last week? And I'm like, okay, I know it's a need, but we have this long planning process and we have to figure out how to fit it in. And it takes more than just like, oh, this is a problem, let's go fix it right now. Because if it was like that, then pretty much nothing would be done, because it'd be all by the seat of our pants. So.
Right.
Exactly. I have one curiosity. If I'm curious if you have like one in your work and career, you're, like I said, you're in this nuanced arena that a lot of people don't see. I'm curious if you've picked up on things that pothole example is a good example, but is there anything else that you're shocked the taxpayer, the average person, doesn't know about maybe infrastructure and roads and, their day-to-day that, something maybe that they're paying for or should be paying for that they know nothing about, that's shocking to you?
So the biggest one I deal with, like, almost, I don't want to say daily, but a lot, is I'll tell someone I work for the DOT and they're like, oh my gosh, why hasn't this county road been fixed? I'm like, okay, I work for the state DOT, so we do state highways, U.S. highways, and interstates. We don't do turnpikes, that's the Turnpike Authority, and we don't do city or county roads unless federal funding is involved in it. And then we're just there to help administer the contract. We're not there on a planning. So there'll be people who are like, oh my gosh, these city roads are terrible. Oh no, ODOT. And I'm like, talk to the city of Edmond. So that's a big one. And then, yeah, just how much planning is involved. Like,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of behind the scenes work to get a thought of, hey, this project needs to be done, to then advertising to designers for them to get the contract to design it, and then the design process, and then going to advertisement for contractors, and then the contractors get it and then build it. So there's just a lot going on.
Do you typically have relationships with contractors and designers and everyone else involved that you like? How does that, is it a bidding process? How does that work?
So designers, from a design standpoint, they will interview. Like, we'll have a day of just interviews with a whole bunch of design firms, and they will kind of give us more or less an elevator pitch on why we should give them work. They'll give us their experience and what they're good at and everything, and we'll be like, okay, this designer will get this job to design, etc. And then for contractors, it's different, where we will put out a list of projects every month. We're like, okay, we need these built. Who wants to bid on them? And then contractors will go and pull plans and put together their bid for it, and then we will award based on low bidder if it's a responsive bid, which means that it meets all the contract requirements, whatnot.
Got it.
Part of Whitney's role, I'm assuming here, is Whitney, often roles I've played is you want to put together an attractive package so you get more contractors interested. We can put together just a component, and that may be more attractive for more contractors to bid small components, or strategies of breaking up or packaging up things so you get more contractors interested. More contractors are interested, the more competitive. So there's a whole strategy there.
And that can also, there's like DBE goals that we have to meet, so disenfranchised business enterprises. And then we can add in a flex start to make it more attractive. We can add contract time to make it more attractive to contractors. Then we also do optional ties on projects. So if we have like two or three that are in the same area, we can advertise them separately, but then we can also say, or you can do an optional tie and be like, this is my bid to bid all 3 projects at the same time. And we compare the optional tie versus separating them out and see which one is more economical for us in that standpoint.
Our representatives at the federal level are saying, hey, look, states, we're going to put together a transportation bill. There's some things we want you to do, though. Make sure you're doing, states, if you're going to use this federal money. Of course, most states do this, is, disadvantaged business goals. So our legislators go, hey, look, we've got disadvantaged businesses out there, and we want to make sure that we're being equal out there. Our disadvantaged businesses are having a shot at it, right? So there's those goals. Then there's lots of other programs. But what Whitney was speaking to was being able to come up with programs and new ideas how to entice better result, be it quality, be it time, be it price. Same thing you do. Yeah, it's almost the same thing you do when you go to the grocery store, right? You have similar thinking when you're buying a car or you're buying groceries. It's also happening at these kind of levels.
One analogy I use a lot is, let's say you need a new TV and all you care about is getting channels 4, 5, and 9. So the basic cable channels. At least that's what the basic cable channels are in Oklahoma. You could get a smart TV that has Netflix and Hulu and all that in there, but if you only need those basic channels, then you can just get a much simpler and less expensive option for doing what you need it to do than a TV that's so cool and has AI and can connect to your phone or whatever. That's going to cost way more. So you do that. Yeah, you do it in your everyday life as well, of being like, okay, what do I need and how much is that going to cost versus what do I want and how much is that going to cost, and balancing those.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm curious this is actually kind of a big question. So no pressure, but what have you seen change? Because how long have you been doing this?
I have been working for ODOT for 10 years. I was in the field for 5, and then I'm coming up on 5 years in my current position.
Got it. So in that time, have you seen any changes in like the way that you do your work? And are there any technologies that improve that? And then I'll throw this word in there just for fun, just to get your thoughts on it. But AI, is it even in your world yet at all with this stuff?
Not from a design standpoint. I think we are starting to see it in construction and more in construction equipment. So like whenever towards the tail end of my time in the field, they were coming out with technology here. I'll just use a Lego to show you what I'm talking about. It's nice. Right here. Steamrollers. They had awesome. A new technology where like you had a tablet as your controller basically, and you would go and compact the asphalt that you had just laid, and it would show you like where you've gone and where you still need to go or where you need to roll over more, so that way you're equally compacting it.
That's awesome.
And that was just so cool to me, like when I was in the field, because I was like, great, we have a way to track this and make sure we're going over the same like we're going over the places we need to, and not just going over one spot over and over again. So that's, I think, the quickest way we will see AI integrated into transportation engineering is through construction methods, through construction equipment and stuff like that. And then ways I have seen the field in general change. Like whenever I started, we were just looking at basic construction methods. We weren't looking at accelerated bridge construction or anything like that. And then the big truss project, what we actually did is we built the truss. So this 200 by 40 foot long, 200 foot long by 40 foot tall truss, we built it offsite. And then have you ever seen a space shuttle moved onto the launch pad? How they kind of drive it down to move it? We took that modular transport system and put it underneath the truss and drove the truss down the highway and raised it into place.
Wow.
And that was my favorite day of work ever, because it was just so cool to see. And there's this like millions of tons of metal moving down the highway with a guy that has like a little RC controller in his hands, like moving this modular transport system. It was just insane.
Mind-boggling. Wow.
That's awesome.
That would be.
So that's just how I've seen it change in the 5 years I was in the field. And then we're doing all sorts of different things now. We're doing precast deck panels where we can do bridge decks in a fraction of the time it would take to do a cast in place bridge deck. So technology's changing and it's so fun to watch.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I nerd out a lot when it comes to like new construction methods.
Looking for a new opportunity? Interested in being part of an expanding network of independent engineers and architects who are thinking differently? Level Design Partners is on a mission to create prosperity for design professionals, the industry, and the world, using innovative business systems and a culture of collaboration. We believe that traditional education and firm structures want you to be a cog in their machine, depriving you of key skills needed to thrive, thus commoditizing an entire industry in the process. Gain access to skills, tools, and systems by partnering with Level Design Partners. Learn more at leveldesignpartners.com.
That's awesome. I think we all need that in what we do. We need to be able to nerd out a little bit. So,
my husband, Josh, he's a bridge engineer. And so with the Baltimore bridge collapse, and I did some bridge training as well whenever I was training for the truss bridge project. And the Baltimore bridge was a truss. And so we've just been like going back and forth, like, yeah, about all of our theories and what we could have done, or like, was it just unavoidable? So yeah, we nerd out a lot with bridges.
Yeah, even just from my, on the sidelines over here when it comes to engineering and architecture and all this, I am learning so much that I'm starting to see the world differently, slowly but surely. And it's almost like once you see it, it's like, you've looked behind the veil. It's like almost too much sometimes. I don't want to know so much about, the details of the roads I'm driving on, the buildings I'm walking in, all that. Although it is reassuring at the same time to know that there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah, well, it's like they always say, like, never work at your favorite restaurant because you'll never want to eat there again because you'll know how they make your food.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you peeking behind the curtain can be good, but then also you're like, I don't know. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Exactly.
Let's you mentioned on something briefly, which is a fascinating thing for me, is I don't think we, as a general public, that we're doing is liquidated damages. Um,
Do you want me to explain
and
that?
yeah, from your standpoint, what is that? And I'll kind of join you on the conversation because it's really interesting. And it's actually, I don't think people think we're doing it. I don't think people think we're
Mm-hmm.
disrupting or thinking about, hey, you know what, as whatever project that we're not thinking about disrupting in their time, the value of their time. I think people think we ignore that, but we don't, do we?
No, we don't. So every project will have liquidated damages in the contract. And that basically is if you go over contract time, then ODOT will charge you so much per day. And that just covers ODOT's overhead of administering the project because you are taking ODOT inspectors and whatnot from other projects that they were going to be assigned to still be on your project. So it's basically ODOT charging you to cover our having to reorganize and all that. For bigger projects, we have incentive versus disincentive. And that will be a milestone that's built in. And so if it's a massive interstate in like the middle of Oklahoma City, you'll have a pretty big incentive disincentive of, hey, if you get done quicker, you get so much dollars per day that you finished ahead of schedule. But if you're also a certain amount behind schedule, then you will be charged so many dollars per day. And that is not part of covering ODOT's overhead. That is just penalizing for added impact to the traveling public. And then we
Right.
also do lane rentals. So if they're closing down lanes that they don't need to be during peak hours, we charge them per lane per hour. So, yeah.
Those values are come up with by the value of the public's time. So a productivity of a citizen on a highway, their personal productivity is averaged, and we have a number of that vehicle and that person stopping their productivity in the world, and because of delay in traffic. And we actually look at the number of people on a particular project, and we actually go, you know what, the traveling public delayed this many people, delayed this many hours. We actually put that number into our calculation for this penalty.
And it actually goes much smaller than that. We're like, okay, this is how much more dollars the driver is having to pay in gas because they are having to go at slower speeds for longer than we intended them to. So we get very minute in how we calculate that. And that's based
So when
on
you're in
traffic counts.
when there's a construction project, yeah, it's like, okay, do I make this project, this contractor, get it in 90 days or 120 days? And then Whitney's going, well, if we go 90 days, they're probably going to charge us this much more money. And if we let them go 120 days, the taxpayer might have this advantage in price. But there's this delay in traffic and there's this cost. And so what Whitney's doing is balancing those things and compromising. Hey, time, total cost versus user delay costs. And that is a thought process that's done all the time. So when you're in traffic and in construction, that hasn't likely been not thought of. You're in an optimized situation for the best bang for your buck as a taxpayer. Miles, did you know that was going on? I mean, it's crazy.
No, it's awesome. How did you end up? I mean, you don't have to tell the whole story, obviously, but like, did you think you were going to end up in this role doing this type of work?
So I did not actually. I've always been a numbers nerd. Growing up, I would spend the summers. My mom was a dean at one of the local colleges, and I would spend the summers in her office. And my toys was an old laptop with Excel. So I've always been a numbers nerd. But starting out, I wanted to climb the ladder in the field. I wanted to be the head field engineer whenever I retired. And it just kind of became of like, hey, this, as I'm doing this, I love redlining. Like that was my favorite part of being in the field, was looking at the plans that we're about to advertise and being like, okay, we need to fix this and this and this, because these issues are going to cost us money when we construct it. It'll be a change order and the contractor gets to name the price, and that's just not going to be good. And so I realized how much I loved that. And then I'm a numbers nerd. I build Excel spreadsheets for everything. And this position came up and they're like, hey, do you want to just kind of see what this is? You're really good at redlining. I'm fantastic at redlining. I don't mean to like brag on me, but do you just kind of want to see what this is? Because this is redlining, but from a numbers standpoint and from a time standpoint and all that. And so I got to go and kind of shadow my predecessor in this current role for a bit and see what he was doing. And I was like, oh yes, I like this a lot. And I turn it into a game when it comes to like cost estimates, because I have what I think it will cost and what the designer thought it would cost originally and what low bid was. And I'm like, aha, I beat them. So yeah, I enjoy what I do a lot. But that's kind of how
That's
I ended
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. It's cool to see how much you love it.
Mm-hmm. And
it's
it's
nice
like,
to know.
It's crazy because whenever you're in school, you're not told all of the different things that you can do as an engineer. What they really just tell you about is design. They go into construction a little bit, but not a whole lot. It's mainly design. And so I was like, well, I don't love the design work I'm doing in school, so I'll go to construction. And then in construction, there's so many different things you can go from there. You can be like a bridge maintenance engineer for the field, where you handle all of the bridge inspections for your district in the year and whatnot. Or you can go do what I do, or you can go be a project manager in the field. Like there's so many different facets of engineering that they just don't tell you about in school that I wish they did, because if I had known this was an option, I might have been like, just boom, straight.
Right?
Yeah.
How much fun is civil engineering, Whitney?
I think it's a lot of fun. It's definitely more fun than was ever explained to me in school.
Wow.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, I've one or two more kind of big questions to wrap. First, we'll start with the negative. Do you have any worries about where we're headed in the US, kind of in general, but probably around like roads and infrastructure and this industry?
So my answer is going to be the same for in general versus more specialized to transportation and engineering. I think as a society, we have been focusing so much on how we can increase profit margins and focusing less on should we be doing these measures. Like, yes, it is great that we're making more money, but should we be doing this? Is this best for the consumer? Is this best for the traveling public? Is this best for the taxpayer? And that's what I do as a value engineering coordinator, is I look at like, hey, yeah, we could do this to increase quote unquote profit margins, which is just decreasing construction costs in my field. But should we do this? Is this going to be beneficial, first of all, to driver safety? That's what we look at more than anything, is we want to keep drivers safe on the roads. We want to keep workers safe on the roads. And then also, like, is this beneficial from a life cycle standpoint? Like, should we be doing this? So I would say that's the most concerning, is I feel like we're moving farther away from the should we do this.
Yeah, that's important. And then what are you most excited about moving forward into the future of this work? And is there anything within the US and also within your work that you're excited about?
I'm just excited to see all the new technologies that are going to come out, the new in design and construction methods. If you think about it, it wasn't that long ago that we were digging for roads by hand with shovels, and now we have all these massive pieces of equipment and all that. I'm just excited to see how much it can change in such a short amount of time. It's wild.
Yeah, me too.
We used to have metal forms that we would grade the road. We would drive stakes in the ground, have a fairly mechanical instrument, and we would drive little stakes in the ground, and then we have the blade operator, try to grade the base of it and try to just nick the top of the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
And we would drive stakes every 50 feet or 20 feet. So that's a person crew driving wood stakes in the ground. So
Wow.
the equipment operator could get this thing, and then all that's done. It's all compacted, and then we would stake metal forms onto the ground with metal stakes, and they would be like every 5 feet, and we would do this for miles, and the forms would hold the concrete, so you could pour it right, and then guys are out there pulling and screeding the concrete by hand, riding on top of that form on top, and all this stuff was manual labor. Now there's just a damn machine that actually is computerized to the drawings, actually trims the subgrade and trims it automatically per the computer program, GPS to satellites, right? And then a paver doesn't need form. The paver just crawls and pours the concrete perfectly without forms. And it's just a whole train of equipment run and computerized, following the drawing, the data on the drawing.
Have you seen the hot in place recycled asphalt construction methods, where it's like a 900-foot long train, and they will go and mill up the existing asphalt, and then they will put it, then it'll go into the next machine in the train where it incorporates fresh binder and so fresh tar, basically, the sticky part of asphalt, and then it will heat it back up and then lay it back down, and it's so cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I was one of the first local agencies using that methodology in our local roads. Yeah, it's super fun.
Mm-hmm.
So you're ripping up old road and real time, right then and there, you're basically recycling it and reusing it.
Mm-hmm. It's just for like surface repairs, so like it won't go down and like do all of your like base layers.
Sure.
But for like if you need to repave the top 2 layers or so,
top,
then it can mill it up and put it back down with new.
I mean, that's cool. Freaking awesome.
It's got a milling machine in the front. It grinds it up into little pieces, and then it puts it in a row. Then it sprays rejuvenator oil, which is chemistry, rejuvenating the existing asphalt. And then it goes into a heating process where that rejuvenated old asphalt is a measured percentage with new asphalt. And then it's heated up, right? And then mixed together and with a new and old asphalt, comes out the other side and gets placed and recompacted all in one operation going down the road.
Wow. Yeah. And it's like, I think that whenever the one I took a field trip to go see in person was like a 900-foot long train of miller, mixer, paver, etc., just going down the road at very slow speeds.
It's very hot.
Oh yeah, we would have guys sitting there with like hoses from a water truck and be like, okay, small little grass fire, spray it out, because it's like right up on the edge of the roadway, and if you have grass going up there, it'll get so hot that it'll start like a little bitty fire, but you just put it out right there.
It's a walking furnace.
It sucks because like in the field you're in jeans and safety vest and your shirt, and you're like, oh my god, it's already 90 degrees outside and I'm by this 300-degree machine.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Thanks, Whitney. Anything you want to tell the audience about your roles and how hard you think about and appreciate and the efforts that your role is in the state transportation world? I mean, your devotion to it. How do you summarize all that, your work and how much you care?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just finding the niche that you are passionate about. And for me, that's what I do now. I'm very passionate about my job. I love it. In estimates time is probably my favorite time of the month for my work because it's a game.
You don't want to be low bidder. Yeah.
No, I don't want to be low bidder, and I don't want to be super high either. And so, yeah, It's fun, and we have a lot of engineers and workers within the state in general that they have found their niche they're passionate about. And if you want to, you can go and talk to them, and they will go down that rabbit hole and explain everything to you for hours. But yeah, for future engineers, I would just say that find your niche that you're passionate about. Explore all the different things about engineering, because you probably weren't told about it in school. You probably weren't. At least I wasn't at all. And there's so much out there that you just wouldn't even know goes into production of things. So yeah, just because you don't think design is fun doesn't mean that there's nothing for you in engineering. There's so many different things.
Well said.
I'll tell a story, Miles, of what probably what Whitney does, and it's actually really an interesting emotional time. Is our if you're the estimator, so you've got a project, it's been designed, and then you put together an estimate for it. Now you've spent all this time designing a project to fit within a budget that the state legislatures approved. And the world is changing. Inflation's changing. The cost of oil, asphalt, gas, materials is changing. And you as an estimator are going, okay, well, this is my budget. And we designed this thing to fit within the budget. And I'm going to put a price on it as an estimator. Okay. And everybody says, yep, this design's within budget. And the estimator says this is in budget. Now let's put it out for bids. And you're sitting down in a room, and there's a bunch of people, contractors and everybody, and you have sealed bids. And the staffer or the purchasing manager is opening sealed bids and telling the room the bid. Everybody knows what the estimator said the project should cost. So Whitney may be sitting there going, I said this project's worth 432 million point 66 and 10 cents.
Mm-hmm.
But the real world is actually saying what the numbers are. One by one contractor by one contractor. And Whitney's going, oh no,
Yeah.
I'm the low bid. I missed this thing by $1 million. And she's going, oh, I blew the whole project. We're $1 million under in funding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just stressful. And then she finally gets two contractors that are close to her. And she's like, I made it. I'm not the lowest bidder. I made it.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Bid opening day can be really great and really not great.
Yeah.
Because I want to say my best bid opening, I had a $1.5 million project that I was $32 off from low bidder, and I was like, yeah.
Awesome.
And then I've had jobs where it's like millions of dollars off on like $100 million jobs, but you're just like, oh no, what did I mess up on? And then you go back, and at least for me, I get a little obsessive about it. I'm like, okay, bid tabs. What was way off? What did I miss? Is it something that like the bids were way high because there was a design issue that we didn't catch? Is it a lump sum item that I just can't estimate because there's so many things that go into lump sum that from historical, I just can't tell. Was I just wrong? So, yeah.
It's super interesting because that representative body that approved this budget for this project, that's like grandpa saying, I want this project. You said it's this price. Give me that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can feel all this energy and work around the grandkids, designing and trying to get this right for grandpa, the state legislators, so they don't have to go take money away from the school districts to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it makes me that specific scenario made me think of the movie War Dogs. I don't know if you've seen it. It's with Jonah Hill. Basically, they kind of finagle their way into the arms like bidding with the government. So they're basically putting together this bid for weapons and ammo, and somehow these two kids end up winning it, and it's millions of dollars, and they're celebrating, and they're like, by the way, how much did we win by the bid?
Oh,
And they're like, oh, the next bidder was like 50 million more than you or something. So they completely missed the mark. They left so much money on the table, and they were the low bidder by a huge margin because they didn't really know what they were doing.
And with the state, what we'll do is if we have a bid that was like way lower than all the other ones, then we'll reach out and be like, you sure about that? Like, is this a responsive bid? Are you going to be able to build the project for the prices you set forth? Or did you miss something? And then,
did you forget the bridge? What'd you do?
And so we make sure that bid is a bid for what the contract actually said. And if it wasn't, if they did miss something, and that's why they were so low, then we'll go to the second bidder because the first bidder was non-responsive to the contract we put out. So, yeah.
Wow. Super cool. Well, thank you, Whitney, for coming on. This was fascinating. I learned a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you for having
me. Thanks, Whitney.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, support us by sharing it with someone or leaving a review. In upcoming episodes, we'll discuss the realities of the industry today and what the future may look like. It's our belief that positive changes for architects and engineers is not the obligation of the industry, but rather a choice you make to reimagine how we work together. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which design professionals thrive. Learn about our mission and get involved by following us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribing to our newsletter at leveldesignpartners.com.